Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining us. You are very welcomed to the first of four pre-conference webinars for the AI+IM Global Summit. My name is Tori Miller-Liu, and I'm the President and CEO of the Association for Intelligent Information Management. AIM is so proud to be hosting the inaugural AI+IM Global Summit in Atlanta, March 31st through April 2nd. If you would like to register or learn more about that event, we encourage you to use this QR code here on the screen, and we will also provide some event details in our follow-up email and in chat here. Just to give you a little bit of a concept of what the summit is, it's a really highly interactive strategic event that explores the intersection of AI and information management. And our goal with the conversation today is to help you prepare for the conversations that you will encounter on site in Atlanta by outlining the important role that information management plays in artificial intelligence. So today we're going to be sharing an overview of the summit. We'll also be establishing some foundational concepts and sharing some event tips that will position you to get the most out of your experience at the AI+IM Global Summit. And by the way, if for some reason you are unable to attend the summit this year, please do not worry. This conversation is still going to be really valuable to you because we're going to be covering a lot of foundational concepts related to artificial intelligence. It also might give you some insights into the event's objectives and hopefully convince you to join us in 2026. Just a couple reminders, if you have any thoughts or questions that you want to share with the group, please use the chat or Q&A feature, and we were going to try to get to as many audience questions as possible. This is going to be a really fast-paced 45-minute conversation, but we want to make sure that we hear from you and get to your questions. Closed captions are available, and they can be turned on through your Zoom tool panel. And please note that we are recording the conversation today, and we're planning on sending that recording out to all the attendees, and it will also be available on demand. After the webinar is complete, please take a moment to share your feedback with our feedback survey that will be emailed to you. We really value that feedback that you provide us. So without further ado, I want to introduce who else we have on the call today. I'm joined by two really wonderful industry experts. First, we have Alan Pelz-Sharp. He's the founder and principal analyst of Deep Analysis and an AIM board member. He's a respected industry analyst with over 25 years of experience in the IT industry, working with various end user organizations like FedEx, the Mayo Clinic, Allstate, and vendors from Oracle and IBM to startups worldwide. He is also a keynote speaker at the AI+IM Global Summit. We're also joined today by Max Gerard. He's the Director of Solution Engineering at SER Group. Max is an experienced software evangelist, pre-sales and customer success leader with a passion for high-quality software and outstanding customer service. He is also an early-stage investor in multiple technology companies and an expert in ECM, business process management, and more. And before we dive into today's event and the conversation, Max, I'd love to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and the SER group. And by the way, SER is a sponsor of today's webinar as well as the summit. So Max, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why SER is interested in supporting the AI pathway?
Absolutely, yeah. So hi everyone, I'm Max Gerald. I look after solution engineering and customer success at SCR Group. I'm based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and some of you may be able to tell by the accent, the British accent. I recently moved to the States from the UK about 3 or 4 months ago with my wife. So who are SCR? Well, we're the leaders in intelligent content automation, which really combines document management, workflow, and AI to allow people to automate, document processes and, find the information they want as quickly as possible. We're a global organization, but we're headquartered out of Germany. And we have very, very strong integrations into lots of best-of-breed applications like SuccessFactors, Teams, Salesforce, to allow people to continue to use the applications, but be able to have all of the documents stored on the back end in our platform, which is called Doxis. We've got over 1,000 customers, and a few examples of really cool use cases that we've worked on recently are things like the Natural History Museum in London. They have over 80 million different specimens of things like butterflies and bees and birds, and a lot of these are stored physically in boxes and rarely seen unless somebody decides that actually I want to see that thing today. So we're working on a project with them to digitize all of those 80 million different specimens to be able to ultimately try and track back through history the causes of climate change. That's their kind of big, hairy, audacious goal. And then other customers like DHL, for example, who we have what they have what we believe is the largest commercial document storage in the world. Over 60 billion documents are stored in our platform. So every time DHL do a delivery, there are multiple documents created. They're all stored in our system. About 120 million documents being uploaded a month. So our platform really scales very well. And then finally, we're starting to integrate lots of algorithms into our platform for things like document translation and being able to converse and talk with documents. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about these AI algorithms as we get through the conversation today.
Oh, how fascinating. Now, if I get to pick, can I work on the Natural History Museum project instead of DHL?
Yeah, well, I wanted to give you an idea of both because we also
Yeah.
do the contracts and the invoicing, but the Natural History Museum, that's the coolest project I've
I
worked
want to
on
see
here.
the bugs.
Yeah, yeah. I've been very lucky to go to the back end of the Natural History Museum and open up pages of books that have got Darwin's handwriting in them. Really,
Oh,
it's
wow.
super cool and exciting. Yeah.
That's so cool. Well, thanks so much for that, Max. So, just to give everyone just some context for what the summit is, whether or not you're planning on attending, I think it's a good idea to understand why we're even talking about AI in the context of information management. Today, we're really diving into the artificial intelligence pathway at the Global Summit. And at this year's summit, you should know right off the bat that we have really fully reimagined AIM's annual event to focus on unstructured data management in the AI era. It's a 2.5 day program that features workshops, interactive sessions, thought provoking keynotes, and networking. This year, we are also debuting peer to peer learning with cohorts. So, participants are going to be grouped in industry specific cohorts that are led by skilled facilitators. Cohorts are going to be able to share knowledge with each other and also provide really invaluable peer support. We've also designed the summit to provide participants with practical advice and resources to help them improve the organization's information management programs, leverage unstructured data, and of course, improve AI and automation implementations and adoption. AI, as I mentioned, is one of our 4 learning pathways at the event, which also includes pathways on automation, intelligent information management, and leadership and change management. Now, I should mention if you are planning on joining us in Atlanta, you don't have to stick to one pathway, but for the purpose of these pre-conference webinars, we really wanted to focus on an individual pathway, but you can kind of choose your own adventure when you're on site. Each pathway and its educational content are designed to help information leaders navigate unstructured data management in the AI era. Okay, so now that we understand some of the context, the role that AI plays at the summit, I want to step back and explore the role information management plays in AI. So I want to kind of make sure that we're all on the same page about AI, especially in the context of this event, but just generally as information leaders. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, and now I'm going to put Alan and Max on the hot seat. So, Alan, let's start with you. Can you give us your best definition of AI in about 30 seconds? And I'm also going to challenge you to cover agentic AI and generative AI and kind of give us a sense of what are those differences. So let's start with Alan and then Max, if you want to debate Alan, let's do that too. So Alan, go ahead.
Sure.
Well, in the simplest of terms, AI is software that learns. I mean, that's the simplest definition, and it's probably the most accurate one, right? Traditionally, software code is written, and that's it, right? That's the job done. With AI, it's sort of continuous iterative learning and adapting to change. So that's the simplest definition. I mean, the last couple of years to get to the agentic thing, we first had generative AI, right, which sort of is self-defining in the sense it generates. So it pulls stuff from here, there. So in IM terms, this document, that document, that document, maybe your answer is to your question is in 3 or 4 different places. So it'll pull those snippets together and create something convincing. That's the danger, of course. It's convincing. It doesn't mean it's actually right, but that's generative AI. And that brings us to agentic AI and agents in general. That term has been around a long time, but it really took off after Mark Benioff sort of made a huge deal of it in the fall of last year at Salesforce's Dreamforce, right? Basically rebranding Salesforce as Agentforce. Now then, it's a term that is widely abused. Most things which are called agents are no such thing, they're bots. But that doesn't mean the concept is incorrect, doesn't mean the technology doesn't work. So the definition, again, in the simplest possible terms of an agent is yes, it utilizes AI, but it's not just AI. It's basically autonomous. It's a role, it's a job that has been completely digitized, and it will, make decisions on its own behalf. So that's terrifying or amazing or wonderful, depending on your point of view. But the dream, the goal is to have armies and armies of agents interacting with one another. We are a long way off that. But at the same time, we are in a world where just in the last sort of 9 months, I guess, 6 to 9 months, um, we don't know the number, nobody knows the number, but at a minimum, probably 100,000 agents have been developed and deployed. So it's
Wow.
pretty remarkable progress.
Yeah, just to build on that as well, like I think that the software that learns thing is absolutely correct. We think of it as around being able to make decisions on data sets that humans can't possibly compute themselves in their own mind. That's the huge power of what AI is allowing people to do within document management as well.
So Max, can I ask you to build on that a little bit since you brought up document management? Why do you feel like we talk about information management and AI as part of these conversations or just in the same sentence in general?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple reasons. One is, when there's we have a lot of customers who want to go and physically scan documents in, and that's having to hand punch in all the different document types and metadata. That's an extremely laborious task that, if you add it up, can literally take years. I think with the Natural History Museum, we calculated that it would take them something like 6,000 person years to go and manually go and punch in all of this data. So obviously, AI can help you, auto classify documents and do things that might go and take many years.
So is that and Alan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. Is that a generally good rubric for when to employ AI in information management? That it's a maybe high volume of data, or it's processes that are really manual and cumbersome? What are your thoughts?
Yes and no. So the latter part there, things which are manual, absolutely. That is probably the number one use case at the moment. So we use the term IDP, intelligent document processing. Some years ago, we would have called it scanning and capture, right? But now with AI, absolutely, you can automate a lot of those paper-based processes, and not only automate them, but frankly, do them faster and way more accurately than a human. I mean, that's a fact, right? It's a proven fact. The AI is actually more accurate than a human doing it. So that is a prime use case. But this is the thing, the use cases are still sort of emerging. For information managers, you're faced with um, typically two big challenges, right? One, you're sitting on potentially billions of documents, but certainly in most cases, even something like deep analysis, God knows how many we've got, we pile them up too, right? Everybody's got massive amounts of data and documents. That's one starting point where you can go through, and the Natural History Museum is a fantastic example where there's value there, and doing that manually is not a feasible option, right? So AI can help there. I would say though, in most cases, you don't look backwards. You basically take a process that needs fixing, or a new process or a new business unit or something, and you start afresh, right?
Hmm.
Because the cost of going back, even with AI, can be just not worth the effort, frankly. So it's a great time where you have an opportunity to rethink, reframe, reimagine the way you do business and potentially start afresh in some places. Most of the agent type use cases should be like that, if that makes sense. It's right, in an ideal way, how would we serve our citizen or our client or our whatever in an ideal way? And maybe with agents, we can pull data, pull from processes that already exist, and suddenly just radically improve that piece of operation. But you don't look backwards, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. One of the things that we find as well is you need to pick the data that you want to look at, and quite a lot of the time you'll figure out actually this data needs to be cleansed. The data itself isn't very good. And the danger of putting AI on top of it is that you stop actually inspecting the below data and kind of start trusting this algorithm that you've put on top of these documents, which then makes you make really, really bad decisions. And there's lots of stories out there of AI, guiding people to do completely crazy and silly things, and actually leading to some legal cases. So you've got to, start with the data set that you actually want to go and point the algorithm to, and then we'll come on to it later perhaps, but then you need to start thinking about costs, because these things are often priced by number of documents or amount of number of characters, for example. So it can sometimes be quite hard to actually cost these things up and then figure out, well, is it financially viable to go and do this use case based on the amount of cost it's going to give us with the algorithm that we want to use.
Oh, so that's really interesting, Max. So when you're talking to clients, you and I talked before about how you help clients identify the problem they're actually trying to solve, but it sounds like the question and the conversation is a little more complex than that. It's what's the problem you're trying to solve, but is there a return on investment? Is it worth actually solving that problem? Can you elaborate a little bit on that about how you talk through problem identification and use case identification?
Yeah, so we'll often look at things that might take, many, clicks for someone to go ahead and do. A good example that we're working a lot with quite a few customers at the moment is around, document translation. So we have a lot of our customers might have 20 different languages being spoken, and in the old days, people would have to go and, download a document, maybe go onto Google Translate, copy and paste some bits of it in, read it, and it actually takes a huge amount of time to go and understand the translation of that. So in this use case, we would, we can automatically send it to an algorithm, like DeepL. It maintains the context of the document, doesn't just translate it in plain text. It maintains, the full structure of it. And something that was taking somebody 30 minutes before, they're now doing that in just a few seconds. So often we look at laborious tasks that people are having to go and do, and think, is there a way in which we can help speed this up, whilst maintaining all the things around data privacy, which again we can talk more on later, because often at the moment these algorithms generally aren't installed on premise, and you need to go and send data to the cloud as well.
What about, and Alan, I'd like to hear your thoughts too, this idea of starting afresh. So you've identified the problem, but when you're calculating, is it worth us pursuing this use case? Do you advise people to look at what's already in place? Like if I've spent maybe $100,000 over the last 5 years trying to digitize all my records, is it worth me going back and employing AI for that use case? Or do I find a
So
different use case?
yeah, so it's interesting because so I started my career a very long time ago in business process re-engineering, and we had a concept then which is just as valid to this day, but sort of got lost over the years, what we call as is and to be, right? So to be is your dreams, your fantasies. How in a perfect world would my organization work? And that's cool, right? It's actually classic goal setting, right? How, what in a perfect world, how would this operation work? What would we be doing, right? So you start with that. And then you figure out your as is. Where are you really at today? Do you have horrible data? Is it all over the place? Have you even defined your workflows and your processes, right? And the reality is everybody's going to find something pretty ugly. That's just normal, right? But what comes out of that is, well, here's the first step. Here's the first constructive step we can make to get to that lofty goal, right? You're not going to get to the lofty goal overnight. That's not going to happen. And that concept's sort of come back. I was at, I mentioned Salesforce twice now for some reason, but I was at their developer conference last week in San Francisco. And I was having a chat with, I probably shouldn't name them without getting their permission, but anyway, a distinguished engineer, that's their title. And he was telling me exactly this amazing way of asking people that, and I'm thinking, well, yeah, that concept's been around for like 30, 40 years. But it's actually coming back, right? Because we've had so many failed AI projects over the last couple of years that, hey, it's cool. Let's play around. Let's test this. Okay, we know the technology works, but it doesn't work for us. So now there's a sort of a resetting, which is a really healthy thing, right? A really healthy thing. Where do I want to be? Where am I now? And what are some baby steps I can take to get there? Now, one of those baby steps, to your point, is if we look back at our stuff, our dark data, the stuff we've accumulated over 20, 30 years, people have been in the habit of just storing everything in the belief that maybe there's something of value there and I don't want to be the one responsible for getting rid of it, right? For whatever. This is a constant theme at AIM conferences. Well, AI now, actually, in fairness, what people, and not many people are doing this, I'll be clear, but what some people are starting to do now is saying, well, you know what? We could actually use AI very quickly to just identify by some basic filters what's actually of value here, or what is probably of value. Now, that could be a filter that says, if this document has not been accessed in the last 2 years, then I'm not interested, right? It might be a filter that says this document was only ever accessed once and never again, right? You can filter out a ton of stuff, and it's no exaggeration to say you will likely end up with much less than 10% at the end of that filtering.
Yeah, and
The
I
vast
absolutely
majority
concur.
will, yeah.
I was going to say something between 10 and 20% because we
Yeah.
do this exercise as
Mm.
people on board, the platform, and they're usually pretty shocked about the amount they can just save in storage fees as well when they're hosting all this data in the cloud. So yeah, and just on your point as well, I think a lot of around the stuff around we talk about AI having to trial it now. People bought software 20, 30 years ago without actually trying it or using it, installed it, and it became shelfware. And there's actually kind of an increased stage with AI that you start using it and it leads to really bad and incorrect decisions. It doesn't just become shelfware, it leads your business in the wrong direction. So we always encourage people to create a small use case, trial out how it works for a couple of weeks, see if it's adding value for people. And if it's not, well, we'll move on. It maybe sounded all great and beautiful with using these algorithms before, but in reality, maybe it's not delivering much value.
I like that experimental approach, certainly to kind of reduce risk to the organization. What are what are other ways that you can be more successful with AI at scale, Max? Like what does a successful rollout or implementation actually look like?
Yeah, I think we need to look at the data set that you want to point to. We probably need to do an initial, as Alan was talking about, do a see which documents and information is actually going to be feeding well into this algorithm because lots of the information may be not needed or useful at all. And then you need to have the right people involved. You're probably going to need to involve some people in the organization around data security. Often when we're trying to implement these things, that's one of the first questions that comes up. And actually sometimes when I'm speaking to people, I won't use the word AI. I will start talking about here's the outcome that you can go and get by implementing something. Because sometimes AI really, we find it really scares people. And people go, oh, our AI project, that's 5 years away. We're not even doing that yet because they're worried about all the implications. And they want to wait for the market to kind of mature a bit more. So yeah, the security side of things is about where are these documents going to be? Where is the information actually going? And for a lot of customers where they can't have anything leave their organization, they're not really putting any data even into a private cloud. It's going to be quite difficult for you to implement some of these AI algorithms out there because a lot of them right now are required to be in the cloud. So yeah, they're just a few of my thoughts.
Well, you bring up an interesting point with the biases or fear associated with AI, and I think it's fair to say I've seen that in a couple different enterprises. But
Mm.
uh, Alan, I want to turn to a question that we had for you in chat that I think is related to those fear or biases against AI. So Ron is asking, once you actually implement AI, how do you actually convince or get support from your legal team to modify data retention policies? Because you made those changes and you did that filtering with AI. So,
Yeah.
Alan, what
I
do you
mean,
think?
the reason we've built up these massive piles of data over the years is because people didn't know what was there, right? So it was the fear of the unknown. And nobody, and I'm repeating myself, but it really is probably the number one thing. Nobody wants to take responsibility. So the reality is, even when you had retention policies, you had disposition sort of policies. The reality is often nobody actually ever pushed the button and got rid of anything, right? That's the truth of it. So AI now gives us insight. So if you can go to the legal department and using the example I gave before and say, look, this pile of data here, which we have identified, it's not business related, right? Most of it only contains a title. It's a draft document that was opened once 10 years ago. That's where you start with the absolute junk, right? You identify that junk. And if you can get sign off to get rid of what is clearly absolute junk, then you started that process, right? So I mean, it's sort of the typical sort of management consulting thing, right? It's a snowball effect, right? Get a quick, easy, visible win. And I say that because, storage is not cheap. It's not, this is a myth, right? Storage is not cheap. And maintaining storage is not cheap. If you could get rid of 20% of your storage just by doing that, there's very few legal departments are going to hold back to say, well, oh, okay. They've only actually been accessed once. They've never been used by anybody and they're more than 10 years old. I mean, what argument is there not to get rid of them, right? But the point is, we've never had that visibility before. It was just too cumbersome and expensive to ever get that kind of visibility. You can get that now really quite easily.
And I think that's a good question there for Max, because Ron had a follow-up question about how, if you're storing all this data, and as Alan pointed out, up until this point, it's really been unfeasible for us to like try to curate like every version of the like thousands and thousands and thousands of documents we have.
Mm.
So when you're implementing AI, how do you manage that filtering to make sure that it's not picking up the the bad versions, the old versions, or the fragments, as Ron put it?
Yeah, I mean, for this, obviously, you probably need some good metadata tagging that you've got on your documents, and need to create a set of filters with that metadata that filters out the stuff based on the kind of rules that you want. That kind of can help you reduce the data set quite a bit. And yeah, obviously, if we can, coming on to something Alan said a moment ago, I think once you start deleting, certain documents, you'll be so surprised by how many you can really get rid of. I mean, we really have in document world, we have very, very cluttered houses, and we're hoarders. Like, no one wants to get rid of anything that they've got, but actually when you do it, you feel really refreshed, and it's much quicker to go and find what you want. So yeah, having good filters in place and good metadata tagging on documents to know which ones you don't want to go in there. Other things as well, I mean, because it comes sometimes down to cost, is the size of documents. Like, we have some customers who have documents that are 50 meg, 100 meg, thousands of pages long. It costs a lot of money to go and analyze that document. Do you really need to go and do it? So it's not just total number of documents, actually, it's the size and pages within those documents too, which, if you have a platform, you can tell really quickly how big those are.
And a point of clarification, Max, can the AI, question from chat here, can the AI help you with that tagging and filtering and applying them? Okay.
Absolutely, and you can do it in a much more simple way. So where you had to, very, OCR probably back in the day was considered AI, but really now that's kind of a pretty standard solution. But there's a huge amount of configuration that needs to get the OCR to go and work. Now you can write, as long as you've got a good, well-written prompt, and I say well-written because there is a technique to doing it. If you've got some well-written prompts, you can link those to data, and it can pull that out in seconds for you. And a relatively non-technical person can start writing those prompts to go and pull the information out of documents as well.
So, question then, Alan, let me send this question over to you. I've had this debate now for a couple of years with mostly IT folks about then, given that you can use AI to help you with metadata tagging now, and I think we've established that metadata is still important for AI implementation. How much metadata do I actually need? Does missing metadata matter as much in the AI era? Alan, why don't you take that first?
Yeah, that's a six of one, half a dozen of the other, in the sense that, of course, lots of great metadata is a wonderful thing. Is it absolutely necessary? Most of the time, no, right? And for years now, not just deep analysis, but lots of people, I'd like to think we actually coined the phrase though back in the day. It was a big bucket approach, right? I mean, if you start with that basically this is junk and probably shouldn't even be in here. This is clearly outdated, but I'm not sure about it. And this is clearly mission critical and business like. Those kind of big bucket approaches are again, it's that filtering, staged filtering. You don't need to start off with perfection, right? You first of all need to start off by just at least focusing on the right stuff. So if you if you are doing sort of a knowledge base or something, or a customer service self-help platform or whatever, it's actually a limited amount of data that is relevant to that task. And so your first job is to find the relevant data. There is, though, so I think there's a danger here that we're being too positive, and I can't be doing with that. We've got to bring
That's
in
very unlike you,
got
yeah.
to be some negativity. Because the question about out of date stuff, fragments and stuff, it's a very valid question, because AI isn't always particularly good at figuring out which is the right version, right? So if you take a document that has been up there, let me just give you a generic example, health and safety document, right? It's been up there for 10 years and it gets updated. Well, over 10 years, every new employee has accessed that document. So, it's got a ranking essentially, right? It's highly ranked. The new one comes in, well, what's this one, right? Now, logically, as humans, we know the one with the latest date on, but you've got to be real careful there. And there are often multiple copies of things. And because they both say version 2, but doesn't mean they are actually the same document. I mean, so this is where information managers, knowledge managers have a real role to play. Max is 100% right. Get some prompting skills. There's lots of tech out there that you can experiment with, but you need to apply your skills as an information manager, right? You as an information manager understand what a taxonomy is, for example, right? You understand these things, the library sciences behind it. So somebody with that background and a knowledge of prompting is a very powerful person in the organization. Somebody who doesn't understand all of that is potentially a very dangerous person with the data.
Yeah, that's right. And even
Go
now
ahead.
we're starting to implement, prompting to find things. So you'll be able to eventually, today, you go and have your search, you have some filters, you plug your filters in. You can now start building that in a natural language way. So please give me all invoices, that need to be paid by this date. You'll write it in a sentence like that and get a return back. Clearly, you still need that underlying metadata to be able to go and get that return back. But you're going to start to be able to simplify the way in which people search and find documents and information.
And Max, let me ask a follow-up to that. That's kind of building off of the point that Alan just made about the role of information management professionals. So Lawanga asked specifically, when you're using RAG or agents, what is the role of IM professionals in the new use of this unstructured data? So you go through a number of these implementations. Do you advise your client to bring in an information manager or a data manager? Do you see that as kind of a crucial role for project success?
Absolutely. I mean, like they're the people who really have the knowledge of, all the content that's in the organization, all of the documents. They should absolutely have a seat at the table alongside, someone from IT around security. Also, remember, we need to speak to end users as well. That's a key thing, is to understand what do the end user use cases really want. As you higher up you go in the organization, they might think, oh, I'll implement this AI thing and that'll impress my boss. But there might be 1,000 users who are going, actually, this isn't really helping me in my day-to-day work. So it sells really well up here, but end user it doesn't. So you need to also have, end users in here, test it out with them, and then get feedback. And it might be they feedback and say, actually, this algorithm isn't helping us and we're better off continuing as we are. Come back to me next time when there's something better.
That's such a cool point. And I think the other role that information managers can play is with compliance. So, Alan, let me turn this question to you. Lewis asked in chat here that many pieces of metadata are tracking record-keeping events, such as creation, owner, source, et cetera. Do we need some of that information to prove the provenance of records, especially in highly regulated industries?
Well, the simple answer is yes, you do. Again, as we've been stressing here, you can auto-generate a lot of that now, right, with AI. So, I mean, because the truth is, we've been behind the times for a long time. Always stressed me out when I would talk to records managers, who I have huge respect for, but they would have these huge complex file plans, but they didn't have an enormous team of people to go through and tag all the documents in compliance with the file plan. It just, it wasn't practical. It is practical now. And again, this comes back to this, each organization is different, right? So, I mean, some have to meet certain regulations, there's different cultures. That's the role of the information manager. That's the role of the records manager, and in some cases, the knowledge manager, whatever terminology you want to use. They understand their organization and they know which pieces of metadata are critical and should be defining that. And again, now we have the tools to actually automate much of that work. You know, one person can basically tag millions of documents, which was just not possible even a few years ago. People claimed it was, but it wasn't. It just didn't work very well. And I think that's the key thing to make a point of here. The AI that is coming to the market now, and there's lots of different forms of AI and different models from different places, but pretty much all of it is really, really good. Just a couple of years ago, a lot of it was really bad. I mean, it was good at one thing and then would just completely mess up at something else. But, you know, the ability now to, I think Max alluded to it with OCR and scanning. You had sort of, you know, you basically had to teach it how to extract data from every different type of invoice. And probably every single supplier you have has a different style of invoice, right? I mean, it was just a tedious, long-winded task. You don't need to do that anymore. The
Mm.
AI can figure that out for you.
Yeah,
And
and just
that's invoices, but that's almost any kind of document, right?
that's right. Other thing I'll add here is around we're finding is obviously the algorithms are helping you do things a lot quicker, but for me, you still can't trust the information, especially in very critical scenarios. For me, you still need a human to go and verify and check. A typical example here is you could probably use AI and say, tell me all of the risks contained within this contract that I'm about to go and sign. And if you just got the data back, you go, oh, well, it all looks good, I'm going to go and sign it. But really, what you really need to go, here are the 10 risks, reference where in the document it is. And they go, okay, well, I'm going to look at the risk that's been extracted, look at what's in the document. And they go, actually, these 9 are good. This one, it's done it wrong. So there is still, in my opinion, an element of human interaction needs to happen, especially on critical things like approving and signing a contract and the risks involved with that.
And Max, do you also think that information managers can play a role in um, complying with some of the new AI legislation that we're seeing coming out? Because I've seen some mandates and some of the policies around, you need to be able to figure out what data you use to train the model. You need to be able to record when a critical decision was made with AI and what that decision was. Is that a role that information managers could potentially play?
Absolutely, because they'll understand the already in place approvals processes, which might be, quite long and laborious sometimes, but actually maybe AI can go and help and speed up. So they can absolutely go and, feed in there.
So let me shift gears just for a second since we've kind of focused on the professionals. I want to go back to the conversations around use cases because you both have mentioned on this call a couple of really interesting use cases like applying metadata, helping with tagging, and helping with digitization and filtering and things like that. What are some other really interesting and successful use cases that you're seeing for AI in information management right now? Max, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. So some of the ones that we focus on are things like document translation. That's becoming very, very powerful. So people can instantly see a translated version of a document, and we can do that, based on their logged in language. The language of the document is this. Okay, it's different. Send it to the API, and then within a few seconds, you've got the translated version. Things like speech to text for meetings, be able to ingest in the transcripts from things like Teams and Zoom's calls, be able to run things like sentiment analysis against those to be able to, know is a customer, going to leave us or not. Chatting with documents, and again, this is a big problem that we're still a long way from solving. But being, we can chat with an individual document pretty nicely, but if I want to chat with my entire my entire installation, which might have millions in, well, how do I know which documents to send when that thing is asked? Again, it's a big problem that we're working on to try and solve. Natural language based search, being able to, rather than go and put in all your traditional filters, be able to write sentences to go and return you the information, the documents that you want. And then to get into the kind of generation side of things, in the configuration side, we're allowing people now to, create their data model using prompts as well. Again, it'll get you 80% of the way there, and then you'll go and do the rest of your configuration, but speeding up creating new data models. And the same for workflow creation, be able to create workflows using prompts, create me a workflow to approve this contract. It requires these, it's got a cybersecurity element to it, needs to go to these people. And then on the fly, you've generated a workflow approval, rather than in the past, that might be quite a manual build to go and do. So that's some of the areas that we're focused on.
That's cool. Alan, what use cases could you add to that list?
Well, I think the most obvious one is the trend, because the world of document management has always sort of fallen into two camps. There's the sort of the collaborative, we're all working together on this contract or this whatever, and then you've got the transactional, right, which is accounts payable, accounts receivable, marrying up a bill of lading with whatever, it's transactional. In that transactional world, that's exploding, right? Just 5-6 years ago, I won't name and shame, but we could probably have listed 5 or 6. We would all have listed 5 or 6 of the same vendors who covered that space. Now there's over 400 vendors,
Wow.
and it's still growing. So the transactional, because it's the same process every time. So there's that element to it. It's an invoice, it's a purchase order, it's a delivery note, right? So it's quite well structured. It's very well structured, in fact. So we're seeing a lot of AI there. And Max mentioned it earlier. When I'm out on the West Coast once a quarter in Silicon Valley, and it's quite hard to get it through to people's heads that actually, in most organizations, 50 to 80% of business processes still involve documents and often paper, right? That's actually the real world we live in. So that's a huge set of use cases, just the transactional stuff. And to be blunt about it, there's a lot of money in that market. I just talked to a vendor last night in Singapore who's doing something with SAP. I think it's just anyway, I won't go into the numbers, but it's quite incredible. It's quite incredible, right? We are not paper free. We are not paperless. The world is still heavy with paper. And so that's, to me, the most obvious one with AI at the moment, because it's where most of the traction is. It's not the sexiest bit, it's not the most exciting bit, but it's where the money is.
And I think it's worth recognizing, especially because I know there's some information leaders and information managers on the call here, that I think the problem for the practitioners right now is that we're being asked to live in both worlds, that we still have to worry about the paper records, but now the digital records and now the AI projects, and we're being pulled into co-pilot implementations, et cetera. The job descriptions are rapidly expanding.
The job descriptions are rapidly expanding, but here's the twist. There's a dearth of good information managers out there, or good records managers out there, right? Way back in the day, if you were implementing a big documentum system, you were also hiring loads of people as document controllers, document managers, and somehow or other that got forgotten along the way, right? So it's a great time to be in this industry. I mean, if you have these skills, you should be in demand. If you're not, shout louder. We need more training. We need more people to be brought up to speed. And yes, the job descriptions will change, but here's the twist. At the heart of it, information is still information, right? The skills we have are not outdated. The skills we have now are just as relevant now as they ever were. It's just we've got to add some new skills on top, and some of them are as basic as learning to do decent prompting. It's not about hard coding. It's not about algebra, and it's really not. This is not data science. These are pretty simple skills if you know what you're doing.
And I think I pulled up our screen here because we're coming a little close to the end of our time here. I think it's fair to say that a lot of those new skills you could learn at the AI+IM Global Summit. So Max, I'd love to hear from you. Is there a session or two that you're really particularly excited about at the summit?
There is, yeah, there's a couple actually. There's one by Scott Francis from Rico, whose title is Digital Transformation Starts at Capture, Converting Paper into ready data, into AI ready data. Now, I like this one because we still speak to many people who have huge amounts of paper documents. And we mustn't forget that, I don't know what percentage is, but a very high percentage of information is still stored in paper. We had a customer just the other day who they had a flood in their basement. They lost 100,000 documents and they're now at risk of being fined. So this is a real problem. So I'm really excited to hear Scott speak about that. And then also Jeremy Smith at Mohawk Industries, turning documents into decisions, capture, process, and power your workflow. So this is all about how intelligent document processing and strategic capture technologies reduce manual tasks. So both of those two, which I think are on the Tuesday, I'm super excited about being at the event and seeing those.
Oh, thanks, Max. And Alan, I know you've been to a bunch of AIM events in your career. What advice do you have for folks listening today on how to get the most out of the event?
Honestly, talk to one another, right? It's a networking event. There are great sessions, and for sure. But you know what? We've just been talking about the dearth of skilled information managers. Well, guess what? There's going to be a lot of them in one place. This is very unusual. Network, share, share your challenges, share your experiences. And you might come out of it with a new job, but you're certainly going to come out of it with new friends. Because frankly, it can be a bit lonely out there if you're the information manager, waving up and down and everybody's ignoring you in your company, right? This is your opportunity to get. I mean, I never terribly keen on this phrase, but sort of, get part of the tribe, get part of the community, because there is a strong community here. And to me, that's the greatest thing about the AIM conferences is just talking and meeting with people.
I 100% agree with that. And you can definitely meet Alan and Max in Atlanta. It's going to be a great event. There's clearly some really great content to look forward to. So I hope everyone gets a chance to register. Check out aim.org and our event calendar if you want to learn more about the event. But Max and Alan, thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope to see many of you in Atlanta. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. See you soon.
Bye.